In the 10 years leading up to 2026, Australian hospitals, wildlife services, and rural police logged a rising tide of a kind of incident nobody outside Australia associates with the country's most famous animal, the kangaroo attack. Not a scratch from a startled Joey on a hiking trail, a collapsed lung, broken ribs, a man dead on his own property, the animal still standing over him when help arrived. The line does not flatten. In the Australian Capital Territory, wildlife officers issued a public warning after a woman was attacked walking her dog through a suburban park, and another watched a kangaroo hold her golden retriever underwater until it drowned. In Millmerran, Queensland, a 64-year-old wildlife carer named Linda Smith was hospitalized with a collapsed lung and multiple broken ribs after a 6-foot gray male turned on her husband, then on her. In Redmond, Western Australia, a 77-year-old man died on his own land, the first confirmed fatal kangaroo attack on a human in 86 years. The species is the same. The continent is the same. The pattern is not going away. It is not just a pattern visible from the outside, either. Officials responsible for public safety have started saying so directly. After a man in his 50s was hospitalized following an attack outside his home in Willows, Queensland, in early 2025, wildlife authorities described it publicly as evidence of growing tension between people and kangaroo populations as communities expand into what used to be open habitat. Years earlier, a New South Wales Member of Parliament, Greg Piper, told State Parliament of a rise in reported kangaroo attacks on tourists in his electorate, visitors feeding animals junk food by hand, then being gashed when the kangaroos escalated. The specifics differ by state and by year. The direction officials describe does not. More contact, more incidents, and a trend they are willing to put on the public record rather than treat as a series of unrelated events. Wildlife officials have a word for what is happening, and it is not the word most people expect, not rage, not madness. The word is displacement, and it describes an animal doing exactly what its biology has always told it to do, in places it was never supposed to have to do it. Queensland Ambulance Services' Stephen Jones, a 30-year veteran of the service who responded to the Millmerran call, put it plainly afterward. The ferocity of that attack was something he had never encountered in 3 decades on the job. Not because the animal was unusual, because the collision of a starving mob, a supplementary feeding routine, and 2 people standing in the wrong spot at dusk had never lined up quite that way on his patch before. Which raises the question underneath the headline. Kangaroos have shared this continent with Australians for 250 years without anything resembling a pattern of attacks. What changed in the outback that turned the country's national symbol, the animal on its coins, its coat of arms, its Olympic team crest, into something capable of putting a grown adult in surgery? The answer starts with a number most Australians already half know and mostly don't think about. The country holds an estimated 40+ million kangaroos, against a human population of roughly 27 million. There are more kangaroos in Australia than there are Australians, and the gap is not narrowing. For decades, that imbalance was simply background noise. Kangaroos live in the bush, people live in towns. The two rarely collide with any force. What has changed is not the number, it's the map. Australia has spent the last 10 years in one of the most severe and prolonged drought cycles on record across its eastern and southern agricultural belt. Native grasses that kangaroo mobs depend on have failed across huge stretches of Queensland, New South Wales, and South Australia. Farm dams have dropped or dried entirely, and kangaroos, unlike livestock, are not fenced in and not fed by anyone when the paddocks turn to dust. So they move. toward towns, where irrigated lawns and golf courses stay green, through a drought that has killed the grass for 100 miles in every direction, toward farms, where stored grain and supplementary stock feeds sit in the open, toward the only water left standing. By 2025, the pressure had become severe enough that South Australia's Primary Industries Department launched a formal financial incentive program, paying registered field processors to harvest kangaroo numbers in drought-affected districts where local populations had outgrown the available feed by a wide margin, an admission in bureaucratic language that the imbalance between animal numbers and available country had crossed from inconvenience into crisis. In New South Wales, wildlife submissions to a parliamentary inquiry, the same period noted kangaroo populations in some drought-hit regions had dropped by as much as a quarter in a single year, not from any single event, but from a slow arithmetic of starvation, vehicle strikes, and mobs pushed into terrain that couldn't support them. The animals are not increasing, they are concentrating. That is the surface explanation, and it is not wrong. It is just incomplete. Drought explains why the animals are showing up somewhere new. It does not explain why, once they arrive, some of them attack. For that, you have to understand what a kangaroo attack actually is, biologically, because it is almost never what people assume. A kangaroo is not a predator. It has no interest in eating a human being. When a large male kangaroo attacks a person, wildlife biologists describe something closer to a fight he thinks he is already in. The same fight he has been having with rival males his entire adult life. Male kangaroos establish dominance through ritual combat. They lock forearms, lean back on their tails, and deliver rapid kicks with their hind legs, an animal built almost entirely around the mechanics of that one specific fight. It is not an aberration when a big buck responds to a human standing upright at roughly his own eye level, in his own territory, near his own food source, by initiating that exact sequence. It is the system working precisely as evolution built it to work, aimed at the wrong species by accident of posture and proximity. There is a comparable pattern elsewhere in the animal world that makes this easier to understand. Male elk and moose during rutting season have been documented charging hikers, cyclists, even parked cars, not because they mistake a person for food, but because the animal's threat response system has exactly one target category during that window: anything upright, moving, and close enough to be a rival. A moose in rut does not evaluate whether the shape in front of it is actually a moose. It reacts to the silhouette and the proximity. A boxing kangaroo, cornered against a fence line with no other buck to fight, and a human standing where a rival usually stands, is running the same script. This is the part of the science that is hardest for people to sit with, because it removes the comfort of thinking these are freak animals or malfunctioning ones. Linda Smith's attacker in Millmerran was not sick, not rabid. Australia has no rabies, and not cornered by a threat. He was a healthy adult male, responding to competition for food during a drought, the way healthy adult male kangaroos have always responded to competition, in a year when that competition happened to include two people holding a bucket of grain. Before we go further, it's worth naming what almost never makes it into a news report: the incidents that end without hospitalization. Rangers and wildlife carers describe far more encounters that involve a mock charge, a stare down, a kangaroo standing its ground on a suburban footpath, refusing to move. Incidents that produce fear and nothing else and never reach a database, because nobody was hurt enough to call an ambulance. The official incident count is not the real count. It is the count that produced a wound. Even the encounters that don't involve a mob territory dispute follow a version of the same script. In 2025, during severe flooding in Southeast Australia that killed several people and left tens of thousands stranded. A kangaroo trapped by rising water was filmed engaging a man in what witnesses described as a boxing match before attempting to hold him under the floodwater. The same combat sequence, the same forearm lock and hind leg strike, triggered this time not by territory, but by a cornered animal reading a human as the nearest available opponent. The trigger changes. The physical response the animal reaches for does not. If drought and dominance biology explain the mechanism, the next question is scale. If 40 million kangaroos are increasingly displaced into human spaces, why isn't this happening constantly, everywhere, all the time? The answer is geography, and it is a narrower answer than the headline suggests. Most serious kangaroo attacks cluster in a specific kind of terrain, the drought-stressed rural-urban fringe, where a golf course, a suburb edge, or a supplementary feeding station backs directly onto open range. Canberra's outer suburbs, sitting inside a wildlife reserve boundary, are a textbook version of this. The Australian Capital Territory has issued repeated public warnings precisely because its geography puts joggers, dog walkers, and large resident kangaroo mobs on the same few hundred acres of green space during dry years. Farms that continue hand-feeding kangaroos and wallabies through a drought, like the Smiths property in Millmerran, are functionally training large males to treat a specific patch of ground, and the humans on it, as a food competition zone they will defend. Take away the concentrated overlap, the golf course, the feeding station, the fence line where mobs gather for water, and the numbers thin out fast across the millions of acres where kangaroos and people simply don't occupy the same square footage. The third piece is severity, and it's the piece that keeps this from reading as an epidemic even as incident counts climb. In the entire documented history of kangaroo attacks on the continent, there have been 2 confirmed fatalities. A man in 1936 who died months after being mauled trying to pull his dogs free of an attacking kangaroo, and a 77-year-old man in 2022 killed by an animal he had raised from a joey and kept as a pet. 2 deaths in nearly 90 years against a rising curve of injuries. Most encounters, even violent ones, end the way Linda Smith's did, with lacerations, cracked ribs, a hospital stay, and a kangaroo that eventually disengages and retreats into the bush on its own. Kangaroos are built to fight other kangaroos, not to kill something the size and shape of an adult human. And in the overwhelming majority of documented cases, the animal breaks off once the confrontation resolves, the same way it would against a losing rival. Which brings the pattern back to the human side of the equation, because that is where the actual leverage sits. In case after case, the presence of a second person, someone who can create noise, distraction, or a second target, dramatically changes the outcome. Linda Smith's son ended the Millmerran attack with a shovel after his mother had already been injured, trying to pull the animal off his father. Without a third person on that property, the outcome may well have been worse. Wildlife officials in the Australian Capital Territory give the same advice after every incident. Never approach a kangaroo alone to feed it, never let a dog off leash near a resident mob, and back away slowly rather than run, because sudden movement is read by the animal as either flight, triggering a chase reflex, or challenge, triggering the fight it already knows how to have. So if the biology hasn't changed, and the animals haven't changed, what actually explains a rising national pattern of kangaroo attacks? It isn't that kangaroos have gotten more violent. It's that drought has spent a decade steadily erasing the buffer of empty space that used to sit between 40 million kangaroos and 27 million Australians. Every dry season pushes a few more mobs onto golf courses, feeding stations, and suburb edges that weren't part of their range a generation ago. Every one of those mobs still contains large adult males running the same dominance combat instinct they have always carried, now increasingly deployed a few meters from someone holding a phone, a dog leash, or a bucket of feed. The animal on the coat of arms didn't become something new. It has always been an animal built to fight for territory and resources with everything it has. What changed is how often, in a drying country, that fight now has a human standing where a rival used to be. Australia has spent 250 years treating the kangaroo as a kind of background wildlife, printed on the coins, mounted on the coat of arms, glimpsed at a safe distance from a car window. The drought didn't rewrite that animal's behavior. It just kept shrinking the distance.